This is In Character. I'm your host, Gerard Robinson, Vice President for Education at the Advanced Studies in Culture Foundation.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Bassett, and I'm sitting in tonight for Gerard Robinson. And tonight it is my pleasure and my honor to welcome Casey to In Character. Casey, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for that welcome, Catherine.
Absolutely. So, Casey, I'm going to start with a really simple question. Who is Casey?
Well, Casey can be defined quite a few ways, but for the audience of this conversation, I am a 16-year veteran in the education profession. I taught high school science for many years. I'm the 2017 State Teacher of the Year for Georgia, and now I'm a district leader for Douglas County School Systems, which is a suburb of Atlanta.
And what about who is Casey outside of school?
The most important facet of my life outside of school is that I am the father of awesome twin third graders. And that's the thing that brings incredible joy to my life.
And I will testify to how awesome those twin third graders are. So, Casey, you were part of a larger group conversation that focused on the topic of equity. And we were focusing on how we would go about establishing a culture of equity in our classrooms, in our schools, in our districts. And in that conversation, one of the things that we talked about was why it is important, particularly at this time, for us to establish that culture. What are some ways or some strategies that you would suggest to people who might be listening for how we could do that?
One thing I think is important is that equity has to be more than just a buzzword that people talk about in education. And then the other thing is that equity can't be a single program that you do or a single event that happens in schools. I think that equity has to be the lens through which you see everything that happens in education, everything that happens in your classroom, everything that happens at your school, everything that happens in your community, such that everything you do, you ask yourself, how can I incorporate an equity mindset to what I'm trying to do and accomplish?
I love that answer. I'm going to probe a little bit more deeply. What is an equity mindset?
I think you can't talk about equity without talking about mutual understanding, without talking about tolerance, without talking about inclusion and appreciation. Equity is about making certain that everybody's voice is heard. Every individual, as well as every group of individuals, is receiving what they need to be successful, the attention, the resources, um, the efficacy, so that they can meet their maximum potential. That's what equity is about for me.
Okay, thank you. Thinking about equity beyond the walls of the school, what can the community do to help us as educators to establish that community of equity?
I think one of the things that schools um, have to contend with when they begin equity work is wondering how well the community is going to support them through it.
Mhm.
Depending on where your school is located, people have to really struggle under that weight, right? So one of the big things the community can do is to speak up, be loud, be consistent in affirming that you agree with the equity mindset that's being attempted in your local school. They need to hear from the neighborhood. They need to hear from the families. They need to hear from the business community that we hear about what you're doing and we agree and we want to support you in having an equity mindset.
When you think about equity and you think about your own two beautiful children, what would you hope a community of equity in their school might look like?
So you'd have to know more about my two kids, whom I absolutely love. My kids are twins. Um, I have a daughter and a son who were incredibly premature at their time of birth. So with that comes some challenges. My son, at just 8 years old, is a cancer survivor who also has mild CP. So when I look at my kids, I'm reminded that not just they're my kids, but how do people see them? How do they see my daughter as a young Black girl? How do they see my son as a young Black boy? How do they see my son on top of being a young Black boy, but also being a young Black boy with significant developmental needs? How do they see my daughter in her age appropriateness? I just remember all these different features and all these different factors that contribute to who they are. So when you ask me, what do I want from their school in terms of equity? I want my school to recognize and appreciate all the parts that make them who they are, and to make certain that they have everything they need to believe in themselves, that they receive the type of services it takes to be their absolute best. But I don't just want that for my kids. I want that for every kid in every school.
And I really appreciate your opening up and sharing some of that personal story. The last question that I know Gerard would ask is one about the journey that you've had since 2017. And he likes to not spoil it for people. So, can you share with us what happened to you in 2017 in terms of being a recognized educator, and how that occurred from the first moment that you heard that you had been nominated for something to when you actually heard your name called?
Well, let me start by saying that, there's certain things you can think about your life, how your life would be different if they didn't happen, right? If I didn't go to the college I went to, I would have gone to some other college. If I didn't live in the neighborhood I live in, I'd live in some other neighborhood. But then again, there's certain experiences that are so transformative that after they happen, you cannot imagine what life would be like without them. And that's what becoming a state teacher has been like for me. It really, really changed my life. Back in 2016 and 17, I was on my 13th, 14th year in teaching, and I was just doing all the things that teachers do, focused on the kids in front of me, focused on the subject that I was um, paid to teach, the subject that I love. I became the teacher of the year for my school, which was humbling because there are lots of awesome teachers at my school. And I became the teacher of the year for my district, which again was like, wow, really? Me? I wonder why. And then when the superintendent of my state visited my classroom on May 16th of 2016 and told me that I would be the state teacher of the year for 2017, I cried real tears because it humbled me to think that I would be given this opportunity. But then I can't tell that story without telling you what happened after that. Remember, I said up until then, I was so focused on the things that happened in my class, my kids, my school, maybe my hallway, but so often that was as far as I thought. The thing that changed my life was becoming the state teacher of the year opened my eyes to see the much broader picture of education in my state and in this country. I learned so much about education policy, about how to advocate, about how to understand and appreciate the way decisions are made, and how to understand topics like equity. My ability to talk about this today is a direct result to the professional development I got through that process.
It is a life-changing experience. Casey, is there anything else that you want to add?
I'll end in the same way that I started. I appreciate you so very much, Catherine. I appreciate Gerard and making this platform possible, and for really investing and spreading the message about how important equity is, about clarifying what equity is and what it is we're shooting for, getting everybody on the same page so that we can have everybody rowing the boat in the same direction.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for who you are.
Thank you so much, Catherine.